If you know me, you know I love slasher movies. But you don't know me, so here I am. Hi, my name is Taylor Funru. This is Devoid of Celluloid. A horror-centered content channel. Might be more if I get a little, feisty. Horror is my passion, my will to live, and more. And I'm here to have a good time with it and also do a little bit of digging and analysis on it. I feel like it's a genre that is a little overlooked at times. She's a film connoisseur. Act normal, Taylor. That's not that hard. It's your first time. It's my first time. Please be gentle. I'm not that big on TikTok. I'm not that big on YouTube. This is my first time. And I posted a lovely little edit in celebration of Scream 6 coming out that had a little bit of, about Billy and Stu. And oh boy. All of the comments were, they're not gay. Apparently people don't realize that queercoding is a thing. So what the inspiration of Scream was? This starts in the 1920s. Let me introduce you to Leopold and Loeb. Leopold and Loeb is the queer Bonnie and Clyde, and it's referenced a lot in pop culture, although it didn't get its spot in the sun because they were gay. Yeah. It's a very interesting case of ego and love controlling somebody and all of the fun topics under the sun. Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb were born and raised in Chicago and grew up in the affluent neighborhood of Kenwood. Couple of rich white boys. Of course, they think they can get away with everything. They crossed paths multiple times in their lives, but they attended the University of Chicago together. Chicago! They had a special interest in mind, which was crime, as they were both attending law school, and they were kind of fascinated with the idea of crime and why people commit it and how they get away with it. Leopold was incredibly smart and more antisocial and intellectual. He graduated from university, his bachelor's, at 17. Cool. I'm almost 23 and I still can't finish college. Loeb, on the other hand, was the more popular and outgoing type. He played tennis, and that's about all that I found on his social activities. He was just more popular because, them tennis folks, they get it going. Just because they were so interested in crime, they wanted to start committing crime together, get a little inside information. So they started with petty theft, went on to vandalism, and then eventually went into crimes such as arson, which is straight fire, dude. Leopold in particular was really interested in Nietzsche, and his idea of Übermenschen translates to above men, so above all men. He believed that him and Loeb, partners of crime and also partners as in lovers, were Übermenschen and could get away with anything because Übermenschen were these men that were so superior in all things that they were above all rules and laws. And he could prove it with the perfect crime. The perfect crime in question, the kidnapping and murder of 14-year-old Bobby Franks. They kidnapped Franks by the tennis court. Apparently Loeb can't stay off tennis courts. They bludgeoned him with a chisel to death and hid him in a tunnel near the train tracks at Wolf Lake in Hammond, Indiana. Big yikes. And even more big yikes, they poured hydrochloric acid on his body to obstruct any features and give them more time on body identification so that they could cover up them tracks. So after disposing of the body, they cleaned the car, burned their clothes. They wrote a ransom note to Bobby Frank's very rich family in hopes to get some money for their murder. Because Leopold believed that they were Übermenschen, he got incredibly cocky. So much so as to be quoted saying, "If I were to kidnap and murder anybody, it'd be that son of a bitch Bobby Franks." Dude, note that there was no tie of him to Bobby Franks other than Bobby Franks was Loeb's second cousin and across the street neighbor, but they had no proof that they were in the same area at that time. Anyways, things got shaky, and they found a pair of spectacles at the site of the body that matched one of the 3 pairs that were sold in Chicago due to a special hinge. One of those was sold to Leopold. So, of course, the guy bragging that he would have killed the son of a bitch gets tracked immediately, and both him and Loeb are pulled in for formal questioning. Loeb cracks almost immediately, saying that Leopold was the main conspirator. He was driving the car. He didn't commit the murder. Just a co-conspirator. Love how I was just talking through my burp. Leopold double-crosses him and makes the same exact confession, switch their names. So now they're pointing fingers at each other in a very heated trial that got nationwide attention, and it screws both of them over. At this time, this is when they confess that they had a relationship with each other. So 1930s at this point. 1930s America didn't like that. They were considered even more immoral, other than them just being murderers. And both of them got life sentences. So they get life in prison. They're allowed to petition for parole, but they are denied it vehemently, and that doesn't really fly with Leopold. He tries to petition for his parole several years. They kept them separated for most of their time in prison, but reunited them, and when they were reunited, they started a whole prison school system in which they were able to provide high school and junior college curriculum to the prison. So go off, Kings. Still really shitty that you murdered somebody, but like, go off. Loeb, unfortunately, was murdered in prison in 1936. He took several stab wounds with a straight razor after a man claimed that he was sexually assaulted by Loeb. Turns out, with further investigation and confession, nothing happened, and it was more motivated by a hate crime towards Loeb due to his homosexuality. Leopold petitioned for his parole several times over, even writing an autobiography in prison and releasing it in hopes to get his side of the story out, and he was granted that parole in 1958. He passed away due to a diabetes-associated heart attack in 1971, and that's kind of the very lukewarm, sad ending to Leopold and Loeb. They didn't go out in a blaze of glory like Bonnie and Clyde did. So, if they're the biggest crime of the century, then what about pop culture? Pop culture's influenced by everything going on. So, did they get their own story published? You bet your bottom dollar they did, several times over. But a big part of their story was that they were in a romantic relationship together. So how did that fly in the 1930s? Didn't fly super well. So let's implicitly make them gay. It'll be a if you know, you know situation. This is when we get the Hays Code, which was from the 1930s to the 1960s, and the concept of coding in films. A lot of people had a lot of things to say about a lot of different things in the film industry back in the day, but they were censored by this so-called Hays Code, which was to keep film pure. Pure in the fundamental Christian view. No interracial relationships, no queer relationships, no acts of lustfulness, so no heavy kissing or any sex scenes of the sort. Code wasn't government inflicted either. This was a self-imposed code.
You've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house.
That happened in the film industry in order to appeal to the masses because we were having a rise in fundamentalism at the time in America. So keeping the movies pure meant bigger bucks. So if you could keep controversy low, you're doing fine. You're doing fine in 1930s America. Except you're not, because it's the Great Depression. First pop culture thing we have to be tied back to Leopold and Loeb was a play, which was later turned into a movie, called Rope. And that movie adaptation was made by Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock is actually known to do quite a few examples of queer coding, so if you would be interested in learning about that, I would love to do a video on that. Rope has 2 main antagonists, which were together as a team to murder somebody, put their body in this table like box, serve a dinner on top of it, with a stack of books right next to them, tied with the rope that they used to kill the boy with. This film is more known for its one shot all the way back in 1948. It's a nearly 2-hour movie. It's a whole play basically being filmed continuously, and everyone was rehearsed to the teeth, and it's a very impressive film, and one of my favorites from Hitchcock. Rope was not the only one to do this. There were many more inspirations, and most notably, in the horror genre, we have the Austrian film Funny Games. That's a very disturbing film, though, so pump the brakes if you're not ready for that. The other big horror film that it inspired was Scream. You knew Scream was going to come back, right? Leopold, the more antisocial schemer of it all, Billy Loomis is very much the one that controls and plans out both the murder of Maureen Prescott. From what we know, the third film suggests that Roman was actually the top of all of this. So we're going to go with just the lore that we know in the first film when talking about the queer coding of this, because obviously they didn't really know that they were going to have sequels. They've already committed their perfect crime at this point. Cotton Weary took the fall for them. They were able to cut all ties of them at the murder, get airtight alibis, as airtight as it can be. It was very lackluster investigation because Sidney named Cotton as the killer almost immediately. Billy dated Sidney, and Stu dated Sidney's best friend Tatum in order to get even more information and also really minimize the suspicion that they did that crime. Smart. Also gross. Stu is the more popular, outgoing type. He's a little bit crazy, a lot crazy, but he manages to pull all of these people to his house in the final bit of the movie for a last-minute party after school gets canceled for murder. So we already have the lineups here. Also, it's very important to note that Loeb is very much the follower and Stu is as well too. And this was the whole concept that Kevin Williamson, the openly gay writer of Scream, kept in his head when writing Scream and inspiring these two off of Leopold and Loeb. Here's a direct quote from him. "One of the reasons that one could get the other one to follow is because I think the other one was secretly in love with him, and it was sort of a fascinating case study on double murderers. If you Google Leopold and Loeb, you will see, and you'll read about it, and you'll get, okay, that's Stu and Billy." Therefore, the googly eyes that Stu makes at the back of Billy's neck when they're interrogating Sidney is not just like, oh, that was kind of odd. No, there is an implied relationship there, and it probably is most likely one-sided, with Stu infatuated with Billy and Billy infatuated with the plan that he has schemed. The performance that both Skeet Ulrich and especially Matthew Lillard give in this film really pushes on that idea that Kevin Williamson is talking about, where Stu cannot seem to keep his eyes off Billy and looks to him to follow exactly what he wants, and Billy is the controller of all of this. We see this in the beginning scene when Stu starts to kind of go off on his own little thought and go into detail about how you gut somebody after both Casey and Steve were gutted the night before.
You're alone.
And Billy shuts him up pretty quickly.
It's called tact, you fuck rag.
Next, you see in the video store, Billy is facing Randy and Stu is like this on the back of Randy's neck, but always slightly looking past Randy. Finally, what I brought up earlier, ogling the back of Billy's neck as they're interrogating Sidney and trying to stoke fear and reveal the whole plan all along. They killed her mom, and now she's gonna die. Her dad's gonna go down for her death, and they're gonna be in the sequel.
It's a Scream, baby!
Therefore, there's a sense of longing in Stu of, if they can get away with this, if they can do the perfect crime one more time, Billy will no longer be obsessed with this, and will only have Stu to rely on later down the road.
Everybody dies but us. Everybody dies but us. We're gonna carry on.
Aw, a true love story. Stu goes from his very confident taunt, mentioning Sharon Stone a lot,
No Sharon Stone.
Slay!
to pure anger, fear, and franticness when Sidney gets away and is now preying on them rather than them preying on her. We get some pretty key information on the phone call that Sidney is calling Stu and asking about his motive.
Peer pressure. I'm far too sensitive.
A little bit more than peer pressure. And then there's also this kind of like break in his facade where it's for comedic relief, but he says, "My mom and dad are gonna be so mad," after he's murdered several people, where it really kind of implies that he was the follower in all of this. He almost was so blinded by love that he didn't know what he was doing. Obviously, he knew what he was doing. And then the iconic line that a lot of people will use as the source of, "Oh my god, they're not gay." And it's when Stu yells,
I always had a thing for you, Sid!
My take on this, and this is now purely like theoretical for me, the rest of the queer coding stuff has been confirmed by the writers, as well as Nev Campbell additionally, that the homoeroticism was not a myth. It was not a figment of our imagination.
I would say that there was perhaps some confusion with them. Pretty confused, guys.
Stu yells this because there's one of two ways this thing's gonna go. One, he kills Sydney. The plan is all complete. He hopefully doesn't bleed out. The second option, Sydney gets the upper hand, kills him, and in hopes that uttering that phrase, there won't be some weird speculative rumors about him and Billy, because it's still the mid-90s, and no one wants to be considered gay.
Maybe some of their anger comes from not being allowed to be who they want to be.
Well, we know how the story ends. He gets a TV straight to his face, and he ain't fooling anybody, especially not the characters in the movie. Randy, literally in the next movie, moments before his untimely demise,
Stu was a pussy-ass wet rag. And Billy Loomis, what the fuck? Jesus. What a rat-looking, homo-repressed mama's boy.
big oof, buddy. No matter how much time passes or more things that happen in the Scream franchise, I think the sequels have always confirmed this, that Billy and Stu will always be a Leopold and Loeb story. They will always be together. They will always be rumored to be together, and the homoeroticism wasn't a myth. They are very queer-coded. This is not saying that their sexuality is this. That's a totally fucked up thing to do. But I think it's really important as we look in films in our past to look at a lot of queer-coded characters and maybe pick up that it's always been a thing. There's a lot of layers there, but look more into queer coding. I would love to look more into queer coding on other horror films. This is the Void of Celluloid, anything goes, horror content galore, and yeah. I think that's all I have to say on that. Woo! First video wrapped. Let's go. What's that? Come here. Come here. I want to talk to you. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like, because every like I will just scream into the void. Bring Stu back! Because I want to see him again. I also just want to see Matthew Lillard. Matthew Lillard, I love you. I love you. I love you. How many more times do I have to say it? I love you. If you want to join other Void Spelunkers, please subscribe to this channel. I hope to be posting regular content. I also have a website that has a bunch of different articles that you can peruse to your liking. See if you can find out some more information. I do talk a little bit about the queer coding of Scream in an article in which I will link below. If you want to read it in red form. In red form? It's gonna be red like the blood of my enemies. If you want to read the analysis instead of hear me ramble on. Sing my song! I don't know. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. My name's Taylor Funru. Welcome to the Void of Celluloid. Be gay. Do crime. Bye!